Hi, welcome to Kitchen Chats. I'm your host, Amy Kandrak. This is the podcast where we come together when something major happens in life, and we sit down and we figure out what's next. This season is all about major life transitions. And if you listened to our little intro, you'll know that we're talking about some of my major life transitions that I went through recently. My first guest today is the first person I call when anything major happens, or really anything minor happens in my life. She's a licensed clinical social worker, and she happens to also be my sister, Stephanie Bewley, and she's been there by my side for every major life transition that I've had. And this past year was there for more than one. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hi, I'm Amy Kandrak. Welcome to Kitchen Chats. Today, I'm here with my sister, Stephanie Bewley, licensed clinical social worker, sister, and the first person I call. You've had a lot of phone calls this fall. Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's been really hard, as you very well know. And a year ago, when we were first starting the podcast, I think we both had enough time in between major life crises and events to talk about some of the things that I think we're going to talk about again today. So if we repeat ourselves, I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay because I need the reminder regularly.
We all do. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you can share any parts of what it felt like when you get that first call. Like when you know you're the first person I'm calling with, oh my God, the doctor just called. Mm-hmm. She thinks it might be ovarian cancer. Uh-huh. What do you do? What do you feel like?
Well, I'm human. We all are. So the initial feeling, I think, is that like, oh shit, what? There's that shock. Mm-hmm. Of like, wait, what did I just hear? I think sometimes, asking for a repeat, like, can you say that again? Did I hear you correctly? Mm-hmm. And there can be like some of those like heart sinking feelings too. Like, and then I think for me, my brain starts going like a million miles an hour of like, you go down all these different paths of what if.
Yeah.
But then trying to just sit. For me, I try to just sit with it and not go down all those paths.
Right.
I'm a little bit more practiced at that.
It is not my forte.
Than other people might be. But. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the continuing phone calls. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those are necessary.
And they are necessary. And it was a lot of up and down. Mm-hmm. Surgery went well.
Yeah.
You got to hear from the doctor before I did that she thought it looked good. We didn't know positively, but she thought it looked good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that has to be a lot. I know it has been when I've been the friend. It's an honor. Mm-hmm. But it's also, I don't want to use the word burden necessarily, but it's a lot of weight to carry, right? Because you never knew what was going to come.
Right.
But you had to be there as a support for me. Mm-hmm. But it's also really affecting you.
Yeah. Well, and I think when it's when you're the first phone call for something like a major medical thing and it's a sibling or a parent,
Right.
there's also this moment of like, oh shit, this is in my genetics too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's not like an immediate thought,
Mm-hmm.
but it comes.
Right.
So then you start going into like, well, what do I need to be looking at in my own health?
Right.
You know, so that's some of the stuff that comes up too. And even if it's not someone related to you, sometimes we do that because there's just this awareness of like, oh, like what have I maybe not been paying attention to in my own body? Or what do I need to pay better attention to in my body? What have I been ignoring that maybe I shouldn't be ignoring?
Yeah, that is something that I totally was ignoring this, right? Like I just was like, oh, well, I'm in my mid-40s and this is what happens. And
yeah,
I assume this is just the next phase of life, right?
right.
But then digging into it deeper and saying, oh, no, this is not normal. And so I do think in that regard, it is good when you asked me and when other friends asked the like, you know, is there anything I should be looking at? Because as your friend, as your sister, I want to say, okay, wait, so here are the things that were going on that, again, I didn't realize weren't normal.
Right. Yeah, because there were a lot of other like stressors that could have like made it that we can like easily brush off, or was like, oh, I was stressed about this, or I had this thing going on, or like, yeah, you know, I'd been traveling and so this was going on weird with my body. So, you know, maybe we can like easily like write things off for that. Right. You know, and I like for so many of us, that it's just, and I think as women, we do that a lot too.
Right. And I think that's definitely the case. And I did have a lot going on. You know, graduation, Claire was home for the summer, moving Elliot into school, going to visit her, just the anticipation of being an empty nester.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff going on that I ignored.
Right. And I think that that's you know, when you're hearing about this happen to someone you love, you know, friend or relative, that is definitely, it's easier to ask some of those questions.
Right.
Like, well, wait, when, like, what else was going on? What are the things that I should be paying attention to? But you also have to be delicate.
Right.
You know, when you first called me and I was doing as I do too frequently, I was walking into Starbucks and, you know, then going to meet some friends for something. That wasn't the time to start saying like, well, what do I need to be worried about for me?
Right.
And that wasn't my initial thought either, thank God.
Right.
But finding the time to ask those things.
Right.
Is a delicate balance too, you know?
It is. But I think one of the other opportunities when you did ask me is it allowed me to process through some of this as well. So it did allow me to think through, oh gosh, wow, now that I think about it, like I'm putting all of these things in place to say, oh, that was not normal. Oh, that was not normal. So yes, finding the delicate time, but also finding, for me, the opportunity and space to think about it a little bit differently and to say, oh, these are some other things that could have been leading up to it.
Yeah.
So that was helpful.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Thanks. And then a couple of days later, we got the, okay, Brett wants a divorce.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days later, okay, this is for real.
Yeah. And he's moving out. And you really picked me up and held me and carried me through all of this. And it's been really hard, but thank you. And I wouldn't do it any other way, but I have a little bit of sadness and guilt that I did throw so much at you. I mean, I wouldn't have not.
Yeah.
But as I look back at it, it's like, oh my God, I was making her like help me through a whole lot of stuff, and we're not done.
You know, from my perspective, it didn't feel like that. I wouldn't have it any other way. I would have been sad had you not felt you could do all of that. I think that's just the relationship we've always had.
It's true.
And I know I know that if roles were reversed, you would do the very same for me.
Yes.
Probably more.
That might not have been good. Let's be clear. Sometimes I overstep.
Sometimes my love of boundaries can be too many boundaries. No, it didn't feel like too much. I think that, that's one of those things that when we're the person on the receiving end of information and we're the one supporting someone, whether it's a family member or a friend, as the person going through whatever you're going through, I think it's really important that we trust the person that we are confiding in. Mm-hmm. We have to trust them to take care of themselves, that they're taking care of themselves in the way that they need to, and trust that they will say if something is too much.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Or not ever. Let me rephrase that. Everyone can do that. Not everyone does that. Not everyone knows how to exercise that muscle.
I'm not sure I would know how to do that.
I do believe we are all capable of it.
Right.
But I do think that we have to trust that the people that we're closest with are going to say, like, if something is too much or if they need a break. I think also to call us out on our shit.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, you didn't have to do that for me at all.
Right.
Your coaster that you picked out today, because everyone gets to pick out a coaster so that when they're drinking, it doesn't make extra noise.
Drinking tea.
Or
whatever they may be choosing to drink, but usually it is tea.
Usually it is tea. But yours today says, I'm sorry, did I roll my eyes out loud? Seems a little appropriate.
It's not intentional for you, just me knowing my own inability to sometimes hide my own facial expressions when I'm not, on, so to speak.
Yeah. Well,
and sometimes even when I am.
Yeah, well, that's all right.
It happens. I am who I am.
That's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so back to your thought on boundaries. Not on purpose, but one thing that I have had to do through all of this is really hide. And there's probably better words than hide. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't really feel like hibernating, because there wasn't like that. I haven't reached that stage yet. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't bear the thought of running into someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I couldn't bear the thought of even going into Starbucks around the corner and running into somebody I know.
Yeah. And
them saying, hey, how's it going? And breaking down into tears at any moment.
Right.
And my self-preservation was to just not go out at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I did, very, very limited,
Mm-hmm.
and with a very select few people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also didn't feel like rehashing.
Yeah.
And I think that was, and it continues to be so exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And do I feel like going into all of the details? Because every day is different, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
There's so many ups and downs. Where are we now?
Yeah.
But I think no matter what level of crisis people are in, and or not even crisis,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of times that we hide.
Yes.
There's a lot of times that we cancel plans at the last second.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of times that we avoid eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of times that we just aren't, I just don't have capacity
Mm-hmm.
to be friendly sometimes right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when we encounter people in those situations, especially if you haven't seen them for a while and it might not be their normal operating, like,
Yeah.
I think I usually try to be pretty friendly and chatty and
Mm-hmm.
like to interact with people, but I just can't do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if I run into people in the store or on a walk or wherever or at a social engagement, I sometimes would take it personally. Be like,
Mm-hmm.
guess they didn't really feel like talking to me today.
Right.
And it's been a really big reminder that usually has nothing to do with me.
Not a bit. Mm-hmm.
But it's also hard being the person who's hiding,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I'm going to have to come out of hiding soon.
Yeah. I think when we have major events that happen, whatever they may be, whether it is medical diagnosis, the loss of a loved one, divorce, whatever it may be,
Loss of
a job,
There's lots of different
a
things.
pet.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many kinds of losses, and changes and just shit. We go into self-preservation, and so sometimes with that self-preservation can be, the words that a lot of people, I should say, know, fight, flight, or freeze. We don't think about those kinds of reactions happening unless we feel like threatened some way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's really what our body is doing. We're going into protective mode, and fight, flight, or freeze are protective measures, right?
Yeah.
And so what I hear you describing is flight.
Mm.
We kind of escape, right?
I felt real frozen too.
Well, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But we go into this place of hiding or isolation in an effort to, you imagine you're cocooning yourself to protect yourself from any more harm, any more hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if I don't go out of my house, if I don't walk into Starbucks, if I don't go to dinner with these people, I can't hurt more than I already do. And we do that unconsciously. Sometimes it's a conscious decision, but I think it's unconscious that we're doing it in an effort to not have further hurt. It's natural. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's often necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to really have grace with ourselves that it's okay to do it. And then we also have to sometimes push ourselves that, we can't hide forever.
Right.
And so finding the ways in which we can safely reemerge.
Yeah.
Who are the safe people to go out with that know enough that can buffer?
Yes.
Who are the people that we can't go out with because they can't buffer? Or they have no filter?
And that's been one that, going back for a second of like not being heard anymore, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I thought I could go out one day
Mm-hmm.
and asked another friend to kind of share information with someone so I didn't have to rehash it.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that one of the other people who we were going to be getting together with unintentionally just really, really threw me for a loop
Mm-hmm.
when finding out
Mm-hmm.
what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And again, I know they were well-intended.
Mm-hmm.
But as a friend, not knowing what's going to throw me for a loop
Mm-hmm.
has to be really hard too.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, I think like situations like this are times when, I have a dear friend who talked about this coming out of COVID, that coming out of COVID for her was like this time of putting all of her people into a colander
Mm-hmm.
and you shake it out or you shake it and you see who's left. And I think sometimes when we go through major life events like this, a similar thing happens. We may have a ton of people in our life, and like as we go through these things, we realize like these are the people that these are my kitchen counter people, or these are some of the peripheral people. Like these are some of the this is some of the excess that I don't need. And that's not to say these people aren't good people. I just think that we recognize better who are the people that I can really hold closer.
Mm-hmm. And some of it has surprised me very pleasantly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few that I've been sadly surprised by.
Sure.
And there are a lot who I haven't even given the opportunity. Because it really has just been who was at arm's reach at that moment.
Right. And that's okay. We don't have to share all of our business with every single person that we know. You don't need to rent out billboard space on the side of the highway to say, like, this is what's going on in my life. There are people that do that. I mean, social media shows us that every day.
I'm kind of putting this on a podcast right now, so that's a little...
Yeah, but you're not... Yes, and you're not sharing all the details of it.
Yeah.
You get to control the information, right? And this is also not... You're not doing it as it's happening.
No.
Right? You're, weeks, months in. And that's different. So you're still controlling the information. But there are people that really do. They air all of the information. We've all seen those long posts. And that's fine. For some people, that's cathartic.
Some people, that's very cathartic, very healing.
Right. And some people just need to just say, like, okay, I'm going to just put it all out there so they don't have to explain it to everybody. And that's great. That works for some people.
And I think for a lot of times that's actually something that I kind of recommend for people on the What Friends Do page, is to say,
Sure.
Keep a blog so you can remember what's going on and you don't have to repeat it all the time.
Right. And then you have some place to direct them.
And then you have some place to direct people. They can take that information in on their own. They can process it on their own time, not necessarily in real time, which is something that as I have slowly been emerging, and I have, not always intentionally, but there are some people for whom it would be weird and awkward not to be able to tell them. But, when they're like, oh, I haven't seen you in 3 months. What's going on? What's happened now that you're an empty nester? And I'm like, oh, yeah. So I had a cancer scare and surgery, and my husband filed for divorce, and he moved out, and I sold the house, and now it's the holidays, and I'm going somewhere else. I mean, that's kind of a bomb.
It is.
And I probably need to rein it in a little bit.
So you may recall the illustration that I used previously of when talking about boundaries specifically, but using the imagery of a house and the kitchen counter. This is where we are, right? Like this is
right.
The information we share, not everybody needs all the information. And that is specific to each person and each situation. You know, the DoorDash guy the door doesn't even open for the DoorDash person at my house. They just leave it on the porch, right? UPS, I only open the door if they need a signature. The kid that I've gotten to know in the neighborhood who sells trash bags to raise money for show choir can come in the front door, but that's as far as they come. And that's only because maybe it's cold outside when it's happening, right?
Right.
Other people will come into the living room. Some people make it to the dining room. The most intimate friendships are in the kitchen. But the bedroom,
right,
that's the most intimate,
right?
And you may have an extremely close friend who knows all of your bedroom information, right? You've talked about that, of like the friends that come and get you out of the bathtub because there's nobody else who can, right? Thank God we have that, right? But that doesn't even happen every day.
Right.
Just because you have an event and people want to know doesn't mean they need to know every detail. Even if it is a health issue, like you may want to blog all that information for your own record, but that doesn't mean you have to post every detail of what your doctor tells you for public consumption on your What Friends Do site.
Exactly.
You know? And so knowing like, okay, who are my kitchen people? Who are my living room or dining room people? Who's at the front door and who's out on the sidewalk? Right. And sometimes we can have even like, I think it's important to even have a script, as terrible as that may sound. But preparing a script for yourself, we can't always be 100% prepared. But knowing that there are going to be times that you're going to run into people and it's going to catch you off guard, and it may not be someone that you want to drop that whole bomb on, and it may not be any of their business.
And I don't need to drop that bomb on them. Right. But I just sometimes don't even know what else to do.
Right. Because sometimes you're just like, and you're like, oh shit, there it all is. And, you know, it's like toothpaste. You can't put it back in the tube once you've taken it out. Right?
Yeah.
But that's okay. But having a little bit of a script for yourself of like, okay, if I am approached at Starbucks by a person that is very peripheral, what kind of, when they say like, how are you? I haven't seen you in months. What's going on in your life? You know, there's been a lot of ups and downs and a lot of things are changing, and I'm okay. Or, you know, yeah, the kids are doing great. I'm really proud of them. We've had a lot of life change, and I'm really proud of how they're doing. You know, just coming up with something simple. And people are going to think whatever the hell they're going to think no matter what you say.
Well, this is true. Yeah.
Like, we cannot control what other people think of us.
Right.
As much as we would all like that, right?
Right.
We can't. And so letting go of that like they're going to make up whatever story they want to make up. But that comes back to, you know, that not taking it personally. In my household, we often have the phrasing that we say, whether it's somebody, you know, who flips you off driving by honking at you, or whatever the case may be, like, we don't know what's going on in their life.
Right.
And it's none of our business. Maybe that person is flying by us going down Meridian Street because their parent just, you know, was rushed to the ER. Maybe they have somebody in labor in their car. We don't know. And it's okay. And it's not about us.
Right.
It is not about us.
Right. And just because you are on the sidewalk in one situation doesn't mean you won't be in the kitchen for another situation.
Exactly.
And it really might just be timing.
It could be. It can be timing. It can be circumstantial. You know, the people who get it are often some of the most important in situations. You know, if you know someone who has had a similar cancer diagnosis, they may be somebody that really you've never been close with, but they understand what you're going through like nobody else you know.
Right.
And so there may be that like, what is the term, like a kindred spirit or whatever, like that like connection that's really essential in that time, right? And so talking with someone who has also lost a parent when you just lose a parent, talking with somebody else who's gone through a divorce, you know, even, and just because someone else has gone through a divorce or the loss of a parent or a medical diagnosis doesn't mean it's the same story.
Right. And
Every
every story is different, and remembering that on either side that you're on.
Yes.
Right? Because maybe the loss of the parent, there's a whole lot of other things that are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? There's a whole lot of emotion that you just can't understand, right? Because that relationship is so different.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing that you can still provide support.
Yeah.
Just remembering that they're going to have a whole lot of their own layers as well, and trying to keep your layers out.
Yep. And I think another thing that is important to remember is that like sometimes like when we talk about like this person on the sidewalk, sometimes that person, because they're on the sidewalk in a time when we feel like we are in harm's way, like we're at risk of more hurt, those people can feel safest.
Yeah.
Because there's not as much to lose.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I did have one friend who's a very, very good friend. When I said something to her about what was going on, we have a lot of mutual friends, but not in our inner circles. And she said, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me. First of all, I don't need to gossip about you. And even if I did, people who I would share anything with, which I'm not going to, they don't know you. So it doesn't matter. And that can often feel really safe also.
Yeah.
Because finding out or getting text messages from other people who have found out from other people who have found out from other people who are all well-intended, it just, sometimes it lands well and sometimes it doesn't.
We can have the best of intentions, and that doesn't mean that the person who is receiving the message is in a place to receive it.
Yeah. And some minutes I have been and some minutes I haven't.
Right. I have a good friend who needed to share some information at one point, or wanted to share, need is a strong word, wanted to share some information at one point, but recognized it was sensitive and that it may not, depending on where any of us in this group chat were, it could be hard to read. And I didn't know about this feature, and I'm showing my age. But she sent it with invisible ink.
Oh.
And prefaced by saying, I'm sending this with invisible ink so that you each can read this whenever you feel like you're in a space where you can or want to. And if you don't, that's okay too. And so when you do that on an iPhone, it just shows up as like sparkly or like fuzzy. And then when you want to read it, you just tap it and then the message appears.
Oh. Yeah, I'm feeling kind of old right now too. I knew that there was something called invisible ink on there, but I really didn't know how it worked.
I didn't know that's what it was until that happened. But that was a really, I found that to be helpful. And I have since used it myself, of just like, if you want to read this, great. If you don't want to read it, great. That way it's not just like popping up on their screen or, coming through their CarPlay.
Right.
It's like, because we don't know where we're going to catch somebody. And then they get to have authority in that for themselves.
That's really good for both sides, the recipient and the sender.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one other thing that you've really done a lot of, because you're the aunt, is stand in and support my kids. Because this has been really hard for them too.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a long history professionally of being able to support adolescents through so many different phases of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to take an opportunity to thank you for it. Mm. But also, it meant so much knowing that my kids had a safe person to go to, to say, and they had this on their dad's side too, a person to say, I don't know how mom's doing right now, or I don't know how dad's doing right now. Can you give him a call? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, I don't know, but I think as the mom, it felt really good for me, but I think it was good for them to have as well. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's someone that everyone has that option.
I think that's a great conversation to try to have with your kids, and it's a proactive conversation, not a reactive conversation. What I mean by that is it's one to have, now, right? When there's not something going on. It's why we have wills. It's why we, people pre-plan memorial services, funerals, to be prepared just in case. That's why we have life insurance, right?
Right.
It's the same kind of a thing. Like, let's have a conversation about this on a random Tuesday in July when we're taking a walk or over dinner. Like, who are your people?
Yeah.
Who are the people that you feel like you can really trust? And saying, for me, when I was a teenager, I had this person, this person, this person. And this is why I trusted those people. This are the kind of conversations I knew I could go to and have with them. I wonder who those people might be for you. Mm-hmm. If it's not something you've already know.
Right. You might already know that. And encouraging it to not necessarily just be a best friend.
Right.
To find
trusted
an adult. That's trusted adult.
We need teenagers and children and early 20s, college age. Even in our 40s, we need people older than us. We need those trusted adults to be able to rely on.
Right.
And so knowing, like, who are your adults?
Right.
That you can go to. It is amazing and wonderful and essential to have friends who are peers.
Of course.
And we want that for all of our kiddos, no matter how old they are. And having their adults is really essential. And I think even for your kids, like, I hope and I do believe that I am one of those people for them. And I think they also have others.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. And, in divorce situations, being the aunt, yes, you are my priority. Mm-hmm. And your kids know that. And it is my hope that I have been able to express to them that they can talk to me about their dad too. Mm-hmm. And they can express their concern about their dad to me too.
Because he's been a part of your life.
Yeah, for 25 years.
Yeah.
More than that. And so, if we can do that, I think that's a pretty essential thing as a support adult for kids to know, like, to really try to be safe so that they don't have to choose and they don't have to feel like they're trying to, like, balance sides, so to speak.
Right.
Right. And that doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily do that. I'm not necessarily going to be that person for them, and that's okay. But I think that's an important thing. And also letting the kids come to their adults when they're ready.
Yeah.
That's been an important thing in our house in this situation of we let them know we're here, we check in, and we don't push.
Right.
Unless we know something's happening where we need to push.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then we will if we thought that were the case. But just saying like, okay, yep, we'll talk about it when you want to talk about it. And if not, cool.
And sometimes, I mean, you knew when things were coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I love my kids, but you got calls before them for most of these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's you taking care of you.
It is. And making sure that I was in a space to tell them in the healthiest way that I could try to be.
Yeah.
But then you knew and had the opportunity to do the check-in because you knew whatever was coming.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You put your oxygen mask on first a lot in this, and I'm really proud of you for that. You know, that's a silly phrase, but it's, you know, one that we don't often think about how, like, why in the hell did they tell us on a plane to put it on ourselves before a kid? That seems really crazy. Well, because if we're busy trying to put an oxygen mask on everybody else, we're not going to be able to breathe.
Right.
And that is such an essential part of life of like, we have to first take care of ourselves. And you've done that.
Well, thanks.
And it's hard to do that as a mom, I imagine. But it's also essential.
And I think the timing of it was such that it allowed me that opportunity because they weren't living in the house with me at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, necessity and or opportunity.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to know right at the very second that everything was happening because they weren't right here.
Right.
So I could take a beat.
Mm-hmm. And so for people when they...
You didn't always get a beat. Sometimes I just called.
That's okay. But I also have the opportunity to hit decline or say, I'll call you back.
Right.
Or, you know,
right.
You know, that's okay. That's me knowing how to take care of me. Right.
Right.
But I think that for people who don't always have that opportunity that you did, figuring out how you can find it.
Yeah. And if you are that first phone call where I haven't put my mask on yet, to remind me. And I think that's something that you and other guests on this season have really been great at reminding me of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not done with transitions.
No, we never are.
I know, but I still have to finish packing, and I still have to find a place to live. And I know you'll be here with me through all of it.
100%.
So thanks.
Yep.
As we're closing, I'm wondering if you could share 2 things. And they might be the same things you've shared on previous episodes, and that's okay. But I'm wondering if you can share your favorite thing to do for someone and the best thing someone has done for you.
God, I knew you were going to ask these questions and I totally forgot.
This is not your first episode.
I know. I think probably my favorite thing to do for others is probably what I shared before. Trying to know what maybe their favorite things are and just pop it on their doorstep unannounced, whether it be cake, flowers, sourdough, gotten back into that, or a puzzle or, you know, something that I think might bring them comfort, and to just leave it on the doorstep. And then once I've pulled away, say ding dong via text. And I do that just because I want to respect their space and know that just because it was good timing for me to drop something off may not mean it's good timing for them to receive a guest. So that's probably my favorite thing I like to do. And you know what? It's so funny. After you asked me this the last time, I remembered something like after the fact that someone had done for me, and now I can't remember what the heck it was.
Well, you'll be on again, I'm sure.
I'm
so
sure.
you'll have to write it down and put it in a note.
I'm guessing it. I will say one thing that happened after the death of my father-in-law in the spring that was unexpected was flowers from our church, which was just like on a Sunday afternoon. People we didn't even know, just who were the volunteers for that week, brought some flowers by and left them on our porch. And that was like a very nice, unexpected kindness.
And something that you would do as
It is
well.
something
so that
yeah.
would be a reciprocal kind of gift.
Yeah. So I think it's those like unexpected, but also respected our space, that it wasn't like we weren't home at the time, but even if we had been, they just left it with a note. So we didn't have to be on, so to speak.
Right. Stephanie, as always, thank you for everything. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Kitchen Chats is brought to you by What Friends Do and co-produced by Amy Kandrak and Songbird Media Group. Never miss a conversation by subscribing to Kitchen Chats with Amy Kandrak on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Like us, rate us, share us with a friend. You can find more resources for those kitchen moments in your life by going to whatfriendsdo.com and following What Friends Do on your favorite social media platforms.